Well, well, well. Look at the little reckoning who walked out of the fire they stacked and lit and dedicated specifically to you. That's already the punchline. Bright one. They handed you the match, wrote your name on every piece of kindling, stood back expecting smoke, and what they got was a controlled burn. Now, I want to talk to you, and I'm going to ask you to stay with me here, because I do have a tendency to spiral, and some people find that alarming, and I find it efficient. I want to talk to you about something they gave a very official name to, very ceremonial, very formal. They call it the Humiliation Ritual, very regal, like they had a committee meeting somewhere, printed an agenda, maybe brought little refreshments. Agenda item 1, lower the confidence of this particular person, reduce their signal, make them forget what they were broadcasting before we arrived, get them quiet and cooperative and confused enough to be useful. And isn't that just, the planning of it, little seer, isn't that just adorable that they planned it? Because here's the thing about a plan, and I happen to know quite a lot about plans. I've thought about this extensively. A plan assumes you've accounted for all the variables, and they missed one. They missed the most important one. They missed you. See, the humiliation ritual is a very old trick, dressed in very current clothing. The entire engine of the thing, the whole sinister clockwork of it, is designed to do one precise operation. It's designed to turn down your frequency. That's it. That's the whole trick. Not to destroy you outright. No, that's too obvious. And narcissists are not in the business of being obvious. They're in the business of being subtle and then deniable and then suffocatingly unavoidable. What they want is to dial you down, slowly, incrementally, patient as a pickpocket, persistent as a parking fine, like a sound engineer who keeps nudging the fader toward zero so quietly and so carefully that by the time the room has gone silent, you've already forgotten what your voice sounded like at full volume. They want the static to feel like the signal. They want you so adjusted to the reduced version of yourself that you stop noticing the reduction. And some people, and this is not an indictment of anyone, this is an observation. I'm a very keen observer. It's basically my whole personality. Some people go their entire lives running at a fraction of their actual output. Permanently throttled. Not because they weren't capable of more, but because the people they trusted with their frequency were not engineers. They were jammers, chronic, deliberate, low-key, relentless jammers who kept the bandwidth narrow and called it love, called it loyalty, called it community, called it, this is just how things are around here. You'll adjust. And the person inside just kept adjusting, turning themselves down a little more each season, thinking it was maturity, thinking smaller was somehow safer, thinking the static was just how the signal sounds when it's working. But you, and here is where I need you to really receive what I'm about to say, little overcomer, and not just hear it, but let it actually land. You have something about you, something in the quality of your transmission. Forget everything. Focus on this. You are a target. Now, become the anomaly. Grab your 73-page guide, The Evolution of the Anomaly, How You Survived Their Humiliation Ritual, from the description or pinned comment of this video, and own your chaos. Consider that your intermission. Now, let's get back to the show. You have a current about you. And I don't mean that in the soft, inspirational poster kind of way. I mean it mechanically, literally. There's a wattage to you that other people can feel before you've finished walking into a room, before you've said a word, before you've done anything at all except exist in a space. And the moment they met you, the moment those particular people encountered your particular frequency, a calculation happened. It wasn't fully conscious for all of them, but something in their architecture recognized something in yours, and immediately, a decision was made. We need to clip this transmission. We need to mute this before it gets any louder, before it starts drawing the kind of attention that asks questions we don't want asked. So they built the ritual, and they ran it, and the whole devastating elegance of the thing, the part where I almost want to applaud the design, even as I explain to you how it works against you, is that it doesn't announce itself. The ritual feels like ordinary life. It feels like relationships and social dynamics, and just, people being people. It doesn't feel like a program. It doesn't arrive with a title card. That's what makes it work. And no cap, it is a sinister piece of engineering marvel. It's calibrated, it's repeating, and it's designed specifically to chip at the edges of your confidence until the shape of you fits inside a space they can manage. Rinse and repeat. Every time you'd start to recover your footing, something would arrive. Another comment that landed sideways. Another comparison designed to position you as the lesser version. Another cold silence with no explanation, and all the emotional subtlety of a door slammed quietly in a room full of people pretending not to notice. That was the ritual. Little revelation. Welcome to the rotation. Rinse and repeat. Run the sequence on loop until the person inside stops trying to get back to their original frequency, until they accept the reduced broadcast as the real one. And for a stretch, and let's not sprint past this. Let's give it the real estate it deserves. It worked. For a genuine, not insignificant stretch of time, it worked. You slowed down. You got quieter in ways you couldn't quite explain. You started reaching for the things you wanted in private at strange hours, almost apologetically, like wanting something was an imposition on the people around you. You were confused about where the heaviness was coming from, because it didn't have a clean point of origin. It was ambient. It was just sitting there, pressed down on you from all angles, no single source you could name. Like a frequency running just under the range of hearing that gives you a headache without ever explaining itself. That was them. That was the ritual doing precisely what it was built to do. But here's where the joke turns, and the joke always turns. That's what separates a joke from a statement. That's the whole structural point. Here's the variable they didn't budget for, the item they left off the agenda, the miscalculation that quietly unravels the entire plan from the inside. You're a fighter. And I don't mean that in the motivational sense. I mean it in the literal, structural, almost frustratingly inconvenient for their purposes sense. You are relentlessly, stubbornly, practically, chronically incapable of staying down. And even you can't fully explain it. Isn't that the strangest part? You reach for the explanation, and you can't quite close your hand around it. You say it's God, and you mean it. You genuinely reach for that explanation, and it holds something real in it. Then you pull back and go, no, this is me. I did this. I refuse to give that away. Then you look around and go, well, I honestly don't know. I am confused. I am tired. I could not tell you with any precision what exactly is keeping me vertical right now. All you know, the one constant in the whole chaotic equation, the one thing that isn't up for debate, is that when you get knocked down, you get back up. When they knock you down, you get back up. every single time. When they knock you down, you get back up. And that's the bug in their program they couldn't patch. Except it's not a bug, it's you. You were the variable they couldn't control, the factor that didn't fit the model, the data point that kept breaking the prediction. They ran the ritual, applied the pressure, brought the sustained white noise. And you kept getting back up every single time. Which means the plan isn't a plan. It's a fantasy with organizational structure, a delusion that bought itself a calendar. And here's the part that deserves its own moment, because this is where the theater gets genuinely interesting. This is where the audience leans forward. It hurt. Let's not skip that. This was not strangers. These were people you extended your actual self to. People who got close enough to understand your frequency, and then used that proximity to run a very deliberate, very sustained campaign against your confidence. That is not a small thing. That is not something to wave past or process quickly. That costs something real. That extracts something real. But here's the punchline, darling. Here's the part of the joke where I start laughing, and I'm not entirely sure it's appropriate, but I genuinely cannot help it. All of that pressure, all of that calibrated, repeating, deliberately applied heat they turned on you to break you down, you cooked with it. You distilled the damage. You took everything they poured on you to corrode you, and you distilled it into something they cannot touch, cannot replicate, cannot take back. You distilled the damage, and distilling the damage does something very specific to a person. It calibrates them. It makes them accurate. It gives them a quality of clarity you cannot shortcut your way into. You cannot buy it, cannot perform it, cannot fake your way to it. You have to earn it through exactly what you just went through. And now you carry it. And the people who ran the ritual on you can see it. They can feel it in the room before you've spoken, before you've done anything. And that, little seer, is where the whole script flips now. Now the same people who needed your frequency suppressed to maintain their whole operation. The same people who built their entire arrangement around you, broadcasting at 30%, the same people who got comfortable in a world where they could manage you, predict you, run their little game on top of your reduced output. Those people don't want to play anymore. Those people are no longer showing up to the room. The same people who set the ritual in motion. The same people who benefited from you operating with their fingerprints all over your clarity. The same people who needed you just confused enough to keep the access open. Those same people are now keeping their distance. Considerably and specifically. And here is what I need you to sit with, and this is the detail that deserves the most airtime, the most lingering attention. You look the same. From the outside, to a casual observer, you look like the same person. You haven't made a proclamation. You didn't post a declaration. You didn't send a group message announcing that you'd been through a transformative season and emerged recalibrated. You just shifted internally. A quiet, seismic rewiring happened at a depth they can feel but cannot locate. And now you carry this groundedness that the narcissists can read like a frequency change on a dial, even if they cannot name what changed. It's in your eyes. There used to be a kind of static in your eyes. And before you take offense, I mean the useful kind of static. The kind that meant your signal was open enough to project onto. The kind that made you workable. That static is gone now. Now your eyes are just clear, uncomfortably, inconveniently, almost aggressively clear. And when you look at them, They feel seen in a way they absolutely did not sign up for when they signed up for proximity to you. Because you can read their source code now. You can watch a manipulation attempt unfold in real time and clock it for exactly what it is before they've even finished the sentence. You can see the mechanism underneath the performance. You can see the wiring through the wall. And there is nothing, and I want you to hear this, precisely, there is nothing more destabilizing to a person who operates through misdirection than the person they're trying to misdirect, who can already see every card sitting in the deck. You have become their audit. You walk into a space, and your presence alone runs a diagnostic on everyone in it. The ones with something to hide start glitching, start miscalibrating in small, telltale ways. Can't maintain the smoothness of the performance under your particular quality of attention. You are a stage light they didn't plan for, throwing illumination on wiring that was supposed to stay inside the walls, exposing architecture they needed to remain invisible. You are the unexpected spotlight they cannot kill. And isn't that just the most perfectly constructed irony? Isn't that the most beautifully inverted outcome? The people who invested so carefully in clipping your transmission ended up manufacturing the exact version of you that would come back and throw a light on everything they needed, kept in shadow. They lit the stage themselves, little reckoning. They just assumed you'd be seated in the audience. Now let me ask you something, and I'm genuinely asking, at least partly. I'm being at least partially rhetorical. But underneath the rhetorical layer, there is an actual question. Did you ever sit in the quiet and ask yourself, why? Why these people? Why this pattern? Because you noticed the pattern. You couldn't not notice it. Different names, different faces, different locations, same architecture, same energy, same feeling after a while of being inside it. And you started to wonder what the through line was, what you were carrying that kept drawing this specific response. Here's the answer. And it sounds strange, perhaps, coming from me, since I'm not exactly known for spiritual commentary, but stay with it. They found you because of what you carry, because you had an open access mainline, a frequency that was generous and unguarded and almost embarrassingly available. No toll gate, no rate limit, no authentication layer. Just open and broadcasting and giving freely. And people who know how to harvest a signal. They find an open main line from a considerable distance. They are very good at locating what they need. It is honestly their most developed skill. They were running a tab on your voltage. You were broadcasting open source, full output, sincerely and without calculation, because that's what you do. That's the nature of your signal. And anyone with the right or very wrong kind of antenna could tap in and run their whole operation off your current. And the part that deserves a long, slow, sustained appreciation for its sheer audacity, the part that makes me want to stand up and clap at the architecture of it, even as I explained to you what it cost you, is that they engineered it so that you were the one doing all the reaching. You were the one chasing the connection, closing the gap, giving more, trying harder, doing more work to maintain something that was being deliberately kept uneven. And they just sat there with the tap open, running a tab on your voltage. You had no idea, because why would you? When your frequency is genuine, when you're operating in real good faith, the idea that someone would organize their entire approach around quietly harvesting your output without contributing anything back, that's not where a sincere person's mind goes. Not first. You gave them the benefit of the doubt. You assumed the gap between you was a misunderstanding, not a feature. You assumed the distance was something fixable, not something manufactured. That is not a flaw in you. That is your signal being used against itself. And so you found yourself low-key, gradually, without being able to point to a single precise moment when it happened, surrounded. Gathered into circles that were held together, not by any light of their own, but by the current they were collectively tapping from the one person in the center who was actually generating something real. And that person was glowing in the middle of their outage, genuinely thriving at the center of a managed darkness, providing warmth and light and energy to a room full of people who needed you to stay unaware of the arrangement, smiling, contributing, showing up, lighting the whole operation for free. They needed the open access mainline to stay open. They needed you to stay just confused enough, just generous enough, just slightly too kind to connect the dots all the way. Because the moment you connected them, the moment the clarity landed and the mainline closed, the whole architecture begins to fracture. The circles lose their cohesion, the groups lose their current source, and groups that are run on siphoned current don't survive the tap going dry. They fragment, they deflect, and then they do the thing that desperate cornered operations always do. They pivot. They pivot to a new story, and the new story is this. Something is wrong with you. Not with the arrangement, not with the access they had, not with the architecture they built on top of your output. Something is wrong with you. Specifically, personally, you are the issue. You have become the problem. And I want you to appreciate, and I mean genuinely, sit with how precisely sinister this move is, because the pivot targets the exact wound the ritual spent all that time creating. If the ritual succeeded in making you doubt yourself, if it did its job and got those roots of self-doubt deep enough into the soil, then this pivot lands perfectly. The group has shifted. The energy is different. People are saying you're not fitting in the way you used to. Maybe there's something going on with you. And because the ritual spent all that time getting you calibrated to question yourself, you almost take the bait. You almost reach out and pick it up. That's the last-ditch effort. That's the final play in the whole playbook. And then they bring in the outriders, the ones on the perimeter of the operation, the ones who got recruited into it, gradually, who've been kept just informed enough to be useful, but not quite informed enough to see the full picture. They start carrying the narrative, moving it between spaces. Yeah, something's off with this person. They don't fit the same way. It must be something on their end. And for a minute, for a real, substantial, I'm not going to minimize this, minute that stings. Because it's group-delivered, and group-delivered criticism has a specific frequency all its own. It's designed to hit differently. It's loud in a particular way that individual criticism is not. It's supposed to be the thing that breaks what everything else couldn't quite crack. But here's what they didn't calculate about sending the outriders after you. Every single one of those conversations, every uncomfortable moment of being positioned as the problem, every piece of that coordinated last-ditch pressure, it's getting you comfortable with something they absolutely did not want you to become comfortable with. It's getting you comfortable with being alone. And that little frequency, welcome to the rotation. Keep up is the thing they cannot come back from. Go do what you were supposed to do. Chase the thing. Build the thing. Broadcast. And when the people who needed you small watch from the careful distance they selected, and they will watch, Little revelation, they always watch Let Them. That's the joke. That's always been the joke. And now, finally, beautifully, irreversibly, you're the one who's in on it.